The Burros of Berea is a conversational podcast. We study the Bible and we talk about it. Not all of us are of the same faith, and one of us doesn't actually have a faith.
And that's wonderful. We all love one another, and we're going to continue to talk about these things.
The things we believe in and the things we believe about what we read in the Bible. Not all of these are necessarily true. Some of it is opinion and speculation. Thank you for
listening and speculating with us.
There you go. That was good. Yes.
You are listening to the Burros of Berea.
Side studies.
All right, welcome back to the Burros of Berea. I'm here with Cherry Lewis.
Hello.
And Andrew Aaron Bishop.
Ooh, all three names. Am I in trouble?
Yeah, in Hendersonville, North Carolina at Giraffe Studio. So please forward all complaint mail to Giraffe Studio at, no, I don't have the address memorized.
Also tips.
Right, there you
Also
go.
tips. I have a PayPal, a Venmo, a Cash App. I take Apple Pay, Facebook money. Oh, I'm sure there's some card over the phone. Any way you can get money to me, I can accept it.
Do you have a Patreon page?
No.
We need to start one.
I've thought about that, but it's like I do charge for my services. So I'm like, on the other side, I'm just like, well, geez, why would these people give me more money? They're paying.
The only tip I ever got in my life was someone told me to never take my mother to a Harley rally.
Maybe your
Good
mother
tip.
would. I don't know. They're kind of fun. They just stage with a cover band playing BTO, as far as I can tell, and
Bachman Turner Overdrive.
yeah, a couple kegs of beer, and retired dentists in leather. I don't think they're that bad.
Really?
I think in the 70s, but it is a long time since then, and that's not how they are now.
No.
Now it's kegs of Bud Light and retired dentists with $30,000 motorcycles and weekend leather.
I was going to say, there's
weekend
probably
one.
a difference between the Harley rally and the Hells Angels rally.
Yeah, except I'm not sure the Hells Angels really exist anymore, at least not. If they do exist in a meaningful way, I'd be willing to bet that they do not exist as the same organization in any meaningful terms that they did
Right.
when they were infamous.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Bike Week? That's not a Harley rally, right? That's something completely different.
That's just any bike.
Yeah, I think Bike Week is probably more like somewhere between the well-to-do Harley guys. Don't forget how expensive a damn Harley is. They're not jokes. And 30-year-olds that want to do wheelies to show off the girls. So I think
Yeah.
I think Bike Week's a different crowd.
Yeah. Do they have a moped week?
Oh, you know what? There's one of everything. I bet you there's got to be a moped.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's probably more my range. Hey, ladies, you want to ride on this hog?
I owned a moped for a long time.
Did you really?
Yeah. I had a Honda Ruckus. I loved that thing.
How about that?
Let's say it's good on gas.
Speaking of Hondas, a lot of people talked about how the disciples had to walk everywhere. Did you know that they had a Honda?
No.
Everywhere they went was in one accord. And
Pretty good.
the dad jokes begin.
I love it.
That was an excellent transition segue. There you
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to do a side study, but before we get into that, and since we're joking, there was a joke I was supposed to bring a long time ago. I didn't, so I'm going to go ahead and bring the joke now. So here's how it goes. There is an Episcopalian, a Presbyterian, and a Baptist, and their wives, and they all die in a plane crash, and they end up standing at the gates, and an angel standing there looking at the books, and they see these three lines, and they're standing in this one big line, and the angel is sort of sending them each to their own individual line. And so the Episcopalian walks up with his wife, and the angel says, "It says here that you were very fond of the drink. In fact, a lot of people said that you were whiskey-palians, not Episcopalians. You like to drink so much that you married a woman named Sherry. You're supposed to go in that line over there." And so they walk over to the line, right? And the Presbyterian walks up. It says here that you are a man of the cloth. It also says that you loved money. And you loved money so much that you married a woman named Penny. You're going to be going in that line over there. And so the Baptist minister looked at his wife and said, "Well, Fanny, I guess we go to that other line."
Oh.
Boom, boom.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Oh.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You noticed the rim shot.
I did. I noticed that in the last. He put a rim shot in the last
randomly
recording.
threw a rim shot in over after one of Rick's jokes.
Yeah, they're terrible. I have an endless supply of terrible dad jokes. I can't help it. Well, We don't have Ralph Hicks here today. Ralph is going to be doing some traveling. Ralph travels all the time. He's on the road all the time. So we're lucky if we ever get him here in the studio. And he's going to be gone actually for a couple of weeks. And I get married. Funny enough, I'm actually getting married this Saturday and next Saturday.
Wow.
We discovered because of some COVID restrictions that we weren't going to be able to get married in South Carolina in time. And that's where our venue, we did this in a hurry. And so we got this venue and not realizing that there were some restrictions, we had to go through the courthouse. And then we had to have an ordained minister from the state of South Carolina, which we did not have planned and didn't know of any. And so we got a marriage license here in North Carolina. We have a North Carolina minister. And my fiance and I are going up to Murphy, North Carolina, to a little church called Vengeance Creek Baptist. Vengeance Creek. It's a beautiful little church. I love this place. I went and visited. One of her bridesmaids grew up in that church. And so we're going up there Saturday. My mother and my aunt and my grandmother are all coming down and going with me on my side. And then her parents and a friend of her family's are going to be there on her side as witnesses. And we're going to have a little marriage on Saturday, which is exactly perfect. I would be totally happy with that. But then we have the following Saturday where we're going to have the actual ceremony and all of the family and everybody will be there. So I'm super excited. So
Well, that's excellent. And
Yeah.
you get to do it twice, which is kind of fun. It can be fun.
yeah, I told her, hey, look at the bright side. You get 2 anniversary presents every year. You know,
Nice.
hey, remember this? We got married on this day, but our true anniversary is this day,
Oh,
right?
Oh, but here's the deal. Means you get a week's warning every year.
Every year.
You can't. So if you forget, it's not a whole second. You get a second chance because there's something will come up and remind you.
Right.
You get a little buffer before the real one, right? Because the legal one is the second one.
That's
right?
No, actually, the first one's the legal one.
Oh, so you don't really get the buffer.
I don't get the pass.
Yeah.
Like I screw up and then a week later I get to make up for what I missed at the beginning.
There you go.
We go like that way. Anyhow, so I'm excited about that. So
Well, congratulations again.
thank you. The next time you will see me, I will be a married man. I'm very excited. So Ralph had asked if we could do a historical account of Lazarus. That was what his plan was. We've all been very busy with our personal jobs and the things that we have to do. And so he did give me some information today, which I thought was really cool. He was reading in some of his Catholic books about the Gospel of John, and he found this little paragraph in it. And he said, I was so shocked. It said that Lazarus's name was John Eleazar, and which I had said before, and I didn't know it was in the Catholic
Yeah,
book.
I remember you mentioning that. Yeah.
Yeah, so Lazarus is basically the English version of the Aramaic word Alazar, which is a Hebrew word, which is Eleazar, which is from the priest line. Eleazar is a priest line name. And so that was one of the reasons why I felt like he had the entrance into the priest's inner sanctum, was because he was from the priest line. But also, it said that it was considered that John, if you call it the Gospel of John, that it would actually work because his name was John Eleazar. So it's pretty neat, and that was in
that's
his
cool.
little Catholic book. So I thought that was pretty cool. But what I wanted to talk about today, and we're just going to wrap this up pretty quick. And this is called the Golden Legend. It was compiled in the 13th century, and it records the Provençal tradition, and it records a grand lifestyle imagined for Lazarus and his sisters. But here's something that's interesting. It says this: Mary Magdalene and her surname, or had her surname of Magdala, a castle, and was born of right noble lineage and parents, which were descended of the lineage of kings. And her father was named Cyrus, and her mother Eucharis. She with her brother Lazarus and her sister Martha possessed the castle of Magdala, which is 2 miles from Nazareth, and Bethany, the castle which is nigh to Jerusalem, and also a great part of Jerusalem, which all these things they departed among them. In such wise that Mary had the castle Magdala, whereof she had her name Magdalene, and Lazarus had the part of the city of Jerusalem, and Martha had to her part Bethany. And when Mary gave herself to all delights of the body, and Lazarus extended all to knighthood, Martha, which was wise, governed nobly her brother's part, and also her sisters, and also her own, and administered to knights and her servants and to poor men such necessities as they needed. Nevertheless, after the ascension of our Lord, they sold all these things. So that was written in the 13th century in regard to Lazarus. So it's like,
So Mary Magdalene is Lazarus' sister?
yes, remember I had said that I thought,
Somehow I missed that.
Yeah, I had thought that it was possible. And if you remember, I said that in our last podcast, we were talking about, I think it was our last podcast, how I can't remember exactly when we said it. I'm sorry. It wasn't in a side study. Or yeah, it was in a side study with me and you, Cherry. That's right. The last time we did the side study. That I had thought that because Luke was the ordered, and we talked about that in the last podcast, how Luke was the ordered gospel. It's the one where it's the true historical account. You can base your timeline off of that. This is all my opinion, of course. However,
Which we know is right.
always. And so if anybody questions it, just send a check to Giraffe Studio
That's right. Or PayPal or Cash App
Or Venmo.
or no.
We're going to start a Patreon for sure. So evidently, and I honestly do believe that I'm right. I think that this time when this woman comes into Simon the Pharisee's house and she kneels down at the feet of Jesus, and she, actually, I think she anoints his head. This is an earlier time. It's literally 2 years prior to when the other Gospels say that it has happened, because it happened right before his crucifixion. So if that's the case and it's ordered, then this could have happened twice. I think that it did, and it makes total sense because, especially for me as a Christian, you go through these different experiences through your life, and sometimes you come full circle to some of the people that you met in the beginning, And it's like there's a difference between you. Like when I talk about David Allen, my relationship to David Allen years and years and years ago, now when I see him, there's a sweetness to it that's, you can't even describe it.
I need to change the air in this place, apparently.
It's not you, it's like,
you.
it's not you, it's me.
Yeah.
It's not me, it's you. Yes, pardon me while I take a drink of this. Brought to you
That was
by
good
Kool-Aid.
Foley.
That was good Foley. So when I read that, I was like, oh, this is neat, because I had thought that Mary Magdalene, as it says in this legend, this is just a legend, someone had written this, but someone else had picked up on this too, that it looks like Mary Magdalene was the woman who was, she's always been mistakenly called a prostitute. She's not a prostitute. She's a sinner, they say. And Simon the Pharisee said about this woman, if he knew who she was, he wouldn't let her touch him. Well, that could be for any reason, not just some sexual sin. I mean, it could be anything. But Mary Magdalene had 7 demons that Christ had exorcised out of her. So we don't know what she was like prior to this, but we do know that she was penitent and she came and she was thankful, right? So it seems to me that in this legend, if Martha was in Bethany and she was taking care of all of the riches, and we know that this family had money, they definitely did. So she was theoretically the good one, the church lady that I was talking about. She's always staying busy doing the church stuff.
Yeah.
This legend sort of follows, and I'd never read this before, but when I was researching to wrap this up, I read it and I was so elated because I was like, oh, wow, that's so close to what, I'd kind of put together in the scriptures on my own. So maybe somebody else saw that. But I believe that Mary Magdalene of Magdala, of the castle of Magdala, was that woman, and that they came again. And I believe that Simon the Pharisee contracted leprosy, that Jesus healed him of that leprosy. And then later on, a couple years later, all of these people converged at Bethany shortly before Jesus goes to his crucifixion, right after the resurrection of Lazarus. All these people come to this big high point.
It's really neat of course, I don't know anything about this basically except what you tell me, but it's really cool to think about how intertwined this stuff might have been. I don't know why that's super fun to me, but it's more fun than if they were just random people in a way. I don't know. It almost looks more possible to me. Because you know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree with you. I think in our own lives, if you think about it, most people keep their circles small. I mean, they're not like just running into just anybody. It would make more sense that they would all be intertwined like that.
Sure, friends of friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that if they, when you're telling a story and, this story could have, according to the Gospel of John, if you had written all the books of all the things Jesus did, the earth couldn't contain, in his mind, the earth couldn't contain all the things that I saw this man do. But I believe that the circle was very small. Andrew was over here, and then he went and got Peter, and then Peter took James and John, and then James and John came over here, and then Jesus saw Nathanael under the tree, and he spoke to Nathanael, and then here comes Philip, and hey, I found this guy, and they're all this close-knit group. They all know one another, or they're in Galilee. And then John the Baptist has, got this craziness. He is the cousin of Jesus, so he's related. And he's the one that's coming in the spirit of Elijah to, make the path straight for the Lord. And
So John the Baptist is Jesus's cousin?
absolutely.
Oh, that's so cool. See, didn't know that either.
And and you find that out in the Gospel of Luke. It talks about how John the Baptist, his father, Zacharias, I think it was, he was a priest. And while he was a priest, him and his wife had been trying to have children. They couldn't. She was barren. Her name was Elizabeth, and that was the cousin of Mary. And so, yeah. And that's how you can put the timeline of...
Cousins?
Wow.
Second,
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, second cousins.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how you can also put the timeline of when Jesus was born, which was not December 25th. December 20th.
No, of course.
Yeah, December 25th is, we say that it's pagan. There is an actual Christian reference. I don't know if I talked about that in the podcast, but December 25th would have been the exact time that the Magi came to visit the Christ child and gave him gifts. That's when that happened. So the Roman Catholic Church sort of adopted that as his birth. He was already 1.5, almost 2 years old by this point, because he had been, taken away because of King Herod and the massacre of the innocents, killing all the babies 2 years and younger, which is also a repeat. Remember I was talking about the second Exodus?
Yes.
Okay, well, if during Moses' time, just keep that in mind. Moses was the first Exodus. They also massacred the innocents during his time. That's why he was put into a little ark, the basket that was sent down the river. So there's a lot of parallels. It's pretty cool. But anyway, when Ralph said that he wanted to, finish this up, I thought, I'll look into that. But when I read that legend, I was like, oh, wow, that's super cool. So let's finish this up with this last little bit here. I'm not going to give you all my sources because it's coming directly from Wikipedia. Therefore, it's completely okay. But so whoever wrote this, thank you for writing it. But it's very, very informative. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to read this, and then that's going to end our Lazarus study, and we're going to move on to our next one for the next week. So according to Eastern Orthodox Church tradition, sometime after the resurrection of Christ, Lazarus was forced to flee Judea because of rumored plots on his life and came to Cyprus. There, he was appointed by Barnabas and Paul the Apostle as the first bishop of Kition, present-day Larnaca. He lived there for more than 30 years, and on his death was buried there for the second and last time. Further establishing the apostolic nature of Lazarus' appointment was the story that the bishop's omophorion, which is some sort of a garment that goes over your shoulder, right? Now listen to this. This is so cool. Was presented to Lazarus by the Virgin Mary. Now, she was no longer a virgin at this point. She had other children. However, if you remember, in the Gospel of John, the disciple whom Jesus loved had Mary. Remember? Mm-hmm. Behold your mother, mother, behold your. So it seems that Mary was with Lazarus. She made him this special thing and gave it to him. So Larry.
Biblical Larry.
There you go. Combination of Mary and
do you guys remember
Lazarus.
the 15th apostle, Larry? So
Played
Lazarus,
by Dan Whitley.
yeah, Lazarus and Mary were together in Cyprus. There's a lot of legend. All Orthodox churches, the Catholic Church, they all have their different versions of these histories. But one thing that really was interesting, Virgin Mary had woven this thing herself. Such apostolic connections were central to the claims to autocephaly. What does that mean?
I have no idea, but it happens without anything helping it.
Right.
It says, meaning property of being self-headed, the status of hierarchical Christian church whose head bishop does not report to any higher-ranking bishop.
Oh,
okay.
Top man.
Yeah. So autocephaly made by the bishops of Kition, subject only to the Patriarch of Jerusalem during the period of 325 to 431. I don't know what that means. Anyway, according to tradition, Lazarus never smiled during the 30 years after his resurrection, worried by the sight of unredeemed souls he had seen during his 4-day stay in hell. Yeah, okay. The only exception was when he saw someone stealing a pot, he smilingly said, "The clay steals the clay." Okay. In 890, a tomb was found in Larnaca bearing the inscription, "Lazarus, the friend of Christ." Emperor Leo VI of Byzantium had Lazarus's remains transferred to Constantinople in 898. The transfer was apostrophized by Aretas, Bishop of Caesarea, and is commemorated by the Eastern Orthodox Church each year on October 17th. In recompense to Larnaca, Emperor Leo had the Church of St. Lazarus, which still exists today, erected over Lazarus's tomb. The marble sarcophagus can be seen inside the church under the Holy of Holies. After the sacking of Constantinople by the Franks during the Fourth Crusade in 1204, the Crusaders carried the saints' relics to Marseille, France, as part of the booty of war. From there, later on, they disappeared, and up to the present day, they have not been traced, supposedly. But then in the 16th century, a Russian monk from the monastery of Pskov visited St. Lazarus' tomb in Larnaca and took with him a small piece of the relics. Perhaps that piece led to the erection of the St. Lazarus Chapel at the Pskov Monastery, where it is kept to this day. On November 23rd, 1972, human remains in a marble sarcophagus were discovered under the altar during renovation works in the Church of St. Lazarus at Larnaca and were identified as part of the saint's relics. In June 2012, the Church of Cyprus gave a part of the holy relics of St. Lazarus to a delegation of the Russian Orthodox Church, led by Patriarch Kirill of Moscow and all Russia, after a 4-day visit to Cyprus. The relics were brought to Moscow and were given to Archbishop Arsene of Istra, who took them to the Zakatevsky Monastery, where they were put up for veneration.
He did a lot of traveling.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. Yeah. Well-traveled in death, for sure.
Jeez. Can you imagine being so venerated after death that people would want your bones and carrying them all over the world? I mean, that's bizarre.
It's an interesting story. Second, I mean, he's the only other person to be raised from the dead besides Christ, right?
Well, no. He had raised the widow of Nain's son. He had raised the daughter of Jairus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then, the disciples, Peter had raised a girl named Dorcas.
Elijah,
The Tishbite raised the son of the widow.
Yeah, the little boy.
There's all sorts of raising going on. I don't know.
Yeah.
Lots of resurrecting going on up in here. But the resurrection of Christ, what it sets it apart from all of the other resurrections is that no one resurrected Christ. Christ was resurrected. He, according to what he said, and if you destroy this temple in 3 days, I will raise it up, which was nothing more than a claim that he was God. So he was capable of raising himself up. So anyway, that ends our study on Lazarus. He absolutely wrote the Gospel of John, and if anybody doesn't believe it, I'll fight you. I'll take you down right now. No, but seriously, I sincerely believe that. Everything that I've read. Now, if anybody wants to disagree with me, I would be happy to do an argument podcast stating this has to be John, and feel free to do it while I'm not here.
I actually looked some of it up. You're not the only person that thinks that.
I'm not.
I looked some, I just,
For fun?
Yeah. I did. I was like, I wonder if anybody else thought this. And
so other people think this?
Yeah. I mean, there have been other people who have claimed that that is the possibility.
To me, it seems like the Holy Spirit's pretty much spelling it out for everybody in the book when it says that, and Jesus loved Lazarus. Maybe he's not the rich young ruler, but I think he is.
Well, I was thinking about the claim that Lazarus was so sad because of all the souls he'd seen while he was in hell. I thought, well, if he was the leper that was healed, he would have been in paradise. Yeah, I would not have thought that he would be in hell.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, it seems that way. And whenever we did the podcast and we talked about the rich man and Lazarus,
I'd say maybe I'd be more sad to think I was in paradise and I got brought back here.
Yeah. If you remember, I had said that Jesus was it a parable or was it a true story, the rich man and Lazarus? And, in our faith in the Baptist church, they believe that it's a parable. Oh, they believe it's real, not a parable. Yeah. And I said, and I agree with that because it uses the name. But then I started studying a little bit more and I sort of claimed that. But then I did some research and I discovered something really unique that I didn't mean to discover. It was purely by accident. So, and I said this in one of the podcasts, I think, but when Jesus talks about the rich man that fared sumptuously and was in fine purple linen, that is the chief priest. The chief priest uses fine purple linen. And he said, I have 5 brethren. Okay, and I'd said this before. So the weird part was Annas, who is mentioned in the Gospel of John, is the father-in-law of Caiaphas. And so Annas was the previous high priest who still has some influence. And his son-in-law is now the high priest. And so this rich man, whenever he's in hell, he looks up, he says, I have 5 brethren. He uses the number 5. And I'd said that Annas has 5 children. And so that would have been his brothers-in-law, but those would have been his brethren. All 5 children of Annas the high priest became a high priest. and his son-in-law, but all 5 of them did. And the weird part was in 37 to 41 AD was one called Theophilus ben Ananus. And we just read about how Luke is writing
wrote
to most excellent Theophilus. He was writing to him. I think Jesus was either speaking prophetically and Lazarus died, but Caiaphas wasn't dead at that point. I think Caiaphas died 6 years after Christ did. But it's almost like it's a parable, but it's true because Lazarus was the person that he raised from the dead. But if you keep in mind, remember what I said about Lazarus? His name is Eleazar. So if it was spoken in his language, it would have been Eleazar of the priest line dies, but this rich man who fared. So it's almost like he's doing a play on who is the real priest and who isn't. It's a pretty unique little thought. But there's no way, I mean, I don't believe that it's Lazarus necessarily. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It depends on the day. I don't know. That's the way it is with everything.
I found it interesting that Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days. Some people say Jonah died.
Mm-hmm.
They reference that this would be in hell, in the belly of a whale. Then you said Lazarus was sad because they thought that he had spent 4 days in hell.
Mm-hmm. And Sheol, that was the word. You remember I said Gehenna or Hades. We were talking about the dead, and I was like, what is the Hebrew word? It's called Sheol, which is where all the dead go, Sheol,
Okay.
in the Hebrew religion. Yeah. So thank you, Cherry Lewis.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Andy.
You're welcome.
That wraps it up, and that's the end of this side study. So if anybody has any argument or anything whatsoever, whenever we do put out this podcast, please, let us know. We're always searching. We're not perfectly set in stone, like this is the way it is. We love to learn. That's why we're Bereans. We like to study to see if it's so, So thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Invited me up, and I did a recording, and Andy, did you live with the Gillums, or did you just...
No, I just kind of worked for him. It was a weird situation, honestly.
Yeah.
And of course, they were weird people, but I had just kind of got out of school not long before that, or, back from up north where I did my internship. And somehow, I don't have any idea how I met him. I have the worst.
Through Ryan Whitted.
Yeah, I guess that would have to be. And somehow they found out that I had gone to school for it, and they had designs on making a recording studio in their basement. And they put together a very modest studio and asked me to work at it.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's kind of how I got my start. If not for that, I mean, there was nothing special about the place, and the work I did while I was there was pretty trash. But it was a nice launch pad, and I worked there part-time while I worked at the Honey Baked Ham, and I recorded for them, and I saved up some money and bought my first work computer, and when inevitably it all fell apart because there was no way that was going to work. If you knew the people, you'd know why. Then I took my computer, and that's right, because it was Ryan's gear. And the whole thing, Ryan, I think there was a falling out there, and Ryan kind of got burned and then sold me all of that gear for just too good an effing deal. Too good a deal. Yeah, and that was the core of my first recording studio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah.
My first recording was with you up there.
You were in, what band were you in?
It wasn't a band. I did a spoken word thing called the Fishers of Men.
Oh boy, I'd like to say I remember it, but I'd be lying.
All I remember is that you had curly hair on top of your head. And,
well, it was a while ago then.
Yeah, it was a while ago. You had curly hair on top of your head, and you were eating ramen downstairs. I think it was ramen or something. And then we recorded that. And that was spoken word. It was called The Fishers of Men, and it was about Peter.